See how we get on. Yeah, I was just saying, did you hear about that whole Monero like 51% attack in the week?
Yeah, so
That
I've
was
just been hearing about it.
that was pretty. Yeah, I mean, I started listening to a Monero podcast just to see like what the deal was,
mm,
and even the Monero heads on there were saying like, yeah, it's probably quite a big deal. Like it could potentially be like that's it, for the coin. And these are like fully invested Monero dudes that have got a podcast.
yeah. Well, I really get Monero actually. It does make sense because it's privacy, and I think, but again, this is something that can just come. Jeff Booth always says about this about it's built in layers, and so such as the Lightning Network, Bitcoin, it's the base layer of Bitcoin doesn't need to be fast or be able to do it because you can just build a layer on top of it, which is the Lightning Network, or is it Liquid? There's different ones which basically do the same thing, and so they can provide the speed, and like you can make way more transactions using Lightning than what you can with Visa, MasterCard, and all of that. So it's more than capable of dealing with the global monetary system sort of thing, using transactions on another layer. And then whenever you need, or whenever you're putting your money to save, you just transfer it back onto the base layer, and then it's super slow and secure and decentralized. And it's the same with privacy. Like privacy can be built on another layer, from what I understand. So it's like you don't need Monero. Like it's just, it will come. It's just that it's not. I don't even know. There might even be something that already exists. I'm not even sure on that actually. But
For what?
like another layer on Bitcoin for the privacy.
For like a privacy thing. Interesting. I don't know. I mean, I think that is the USP of Monero is the privacy. It's pure privacy. It's not a hodling coin. Like if you're mining it and then buying it for long term store of value, that's not what it's for.
This is the thing. Like out of all of the shitcoins that exist, Monero makes the most sense to me, because at least they are really focused on that privacy. But then exactly with what's happened, because it's not as decentralized, as secure as Bitcoin, 51% attacks are possible, or centralization is possible. And that is the point, is like you just need to focus. Like if everyone just focused on one, we could actually get the world and the outcome that we actually really want. But the more distractions there are from shitcoins and all these other things, the longer, the harder it is for Bitcoin to be able to do what it actually is intended to do, sort of thing. There's the whole stages of money where it goes from like store of value to medium of exchange to unit of account sort of thing. Like we have to get it as a proper store of value first, and that's probably not going to happen until the volatility is reduced significantly, like from where it is today. The benefit for us being in it now is that the volatility is literally the benefit, that is so useful for us because we can use that volatility to buy Bitcoin for way less than what it's actually worth. And so, but for most people, they see volatility as like,
it's a
a
downside.
risk. It's like, how can I use Bitcoin if I don't know, next week it could be 80% down. So how am I supposed to, that's store value, that's what their argument is. But actually it's just that because so few people understand it still, and it's still, what I hear between 1% and 6% of global adoption. 3% seems to be like the number that gets thrown around at the minute, but there's only 3% of the world using it. So
it's completely fresh. It's gone from like not even priced in any kind of value terms at all, to $100,000 for one in 16 years.
Well, what is it? Who's the guy that does like the 100 or 900 trillion dollars? Do you know there's the guy on Twitter who like Saylor always uses in his talks, where it's got like $900 trillion of.
Oh, that is it. The OG.
What his name is.
That OG that's got loads of Bitcoin that wears a cowboy hat. Not him.
Oh no. Here it is. I found it. Jesse Myers, that's it.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that's I don't know, let me just put it up so that it's easier to see. Screen. Yeah, you've probably seen this before. Can you see that?
Yep.
So like that's what I think. This is the part. If most people could see this and realize there's two different schools of thought here. So I've seen Saylor say that about half of the world's total assets are literally just looking for a store of value, and like Bitcoin does that better than anything else. So he's sort of saying there's 450 trillion that Bitcoin's after. Whereas if you listen to someone like Jeff Booth, he's just like, it's a whole other entity to the traditional market, and it's basically going after all 900 trillion.
Okay.
Plus he even talks about there's like 600 trillion, like underneath this there's like 600 trillion of, I can't remember the word that is used, but basically like debt that can't be paid off. So it's actually way more than that, it's technically like 1.5
quadrillion or whatever.
That is actually after. So he like Jeff Booth talks in terms of like Bitcoin is actually worth in purchasing power today $43 million. It's just that it's so undervalued at the minute, and like so many people don't understand it. Whereas like Saylor would say it's more of like half of that, so about $21 million or something, because it's going after half of this total thing. But I think that's the massive thing for most people. It's gone from, like you say, it's gone from naught to over $100,000. It seems like you're too late. You've missed out.
Yeah.
Whereas if you see it like what Jeff Booth or Michael Saylor are seeing it as, you're actually getting a huge discount.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah. Most of my friends
is beneficial.
Most of my friends that I'd mention it to, they'd be like, "Isn't it too late? Like it's like $100,000 a coin," and it's like, I haven't got $100,000 to spend.
And then that's where XRP comes up, and they're like, XRP, I could buy
only
loads
£3
of XRP.
Exactly, yeah.
Or then they see the meme coins that are like 0.0000005.
Exactly.
Like, I could buy like 1 billion of them. If that goes to $1, I'll be a billionaire. Like, they just, so it's the understanding of the market cap that is so important. And like once Bitcoin actually takes its share of that, then it will become less volatile, and then it will be a true store of value, and then it will be easier to move to a medium of exchange. But this is what people like. If you see, the Michael Jordan from Bitcoin Way.
Don't think so.
I saw his talk in Prague. I thought it was one of the best ones actually. But him and the Bitcoin Way philosophy, similar to Jeff Booth, is that Bitcoin needs to be used as a medium of exchange. Otherwise it will fail, because if people only use it as a store of value, like digital gold, you may as well just buy the ETF, because what's the point in going through all the hassle of self-custodying, running a node, doing all of those things that actually makes Bitcoin decentralized and secure, which Jeff Booth says repeatedly, as long as Bitcoin stays decentralized and secure, it will reprice the entire system. And that's what he's referring to, is basically as long as people like you and me and more new people keep joining the network to run their own node, actually use Bitcoin for its real use case and actually transfer value in it, then it will. That's his point. Is I don't think he doesn't even believe it won't stay decentralized and secure. He's just saying that to make people do their own work to realize how to keep it decentralized and secure.
Yeah.
I've heard him say that before as well. So yeah, that's really the main thing.
Yeah, I still need to set this node up. I gave up first time after it was like 5 weeks remaining.
I actually went down a bit of a rabbit hole with that. So your hard drive.
Yeah.
If it has this blue thing in, it means it's like a HHD or something.
Right.
whatever that means. But we need an SSD.
Oh yeah, it's got the blue thing in, yeah.
So yeah, you've probably got the same as me then, and that's probably why it took us so long to do. Whereas if we had what's called an SSD hard drive, it would be way quicker. So
right, okay,
we could probably just buy one for like $100 or something.
Dollars. We're in dollars.
Yeah, let's just use dollars now. Too used to looking at Bitcoin.
Yeah, probably just buy it for like 10,000 sats or something.
Yeah. If you do that, then you can put it on. Or I think, the better way would be to buy like the Raspberry Pi or something, and then you can. I've sort of done full circle on this. I was like, no, I'm just going to buy the Start 9 or the Umbrella or whatever, and it's all like plug and play, much easier, and you can just start running it. But I actually think there's a lot of benefit to buying like a small computer or something yourself and then setting it all up just to actually learn what's really going on. So I think I'll probably do all three. I will get a hard drive and just see how easy and quick it is to set it up. I try and copy those videos that we were trying to use. I'll also try and set my own one up using a computer like Raspberry Pi or something, and then maybe just have like the Start 9 or whatever it is, and just to see, like, so you can compare them all against each other, and then probably just use the Start 9 or something eventually.
My issue is that I'm literally like a technological idiot, so I'll try and learn something new, and I'll probably spend like a day on it, and if it doesn't work, I just give up, and then I'm just like, all right, well, I'm not doing that again. Yeah. So I'll literally need somebody to come and be like, right, this is how you do it, and just hold my hand. Because even like watching YouTube videos and stuff, I'll try my best, but then I'm like, well, it's not done the thing, and then so I'll let you do it first, and then I'll just say, right, you come and do mine.
I was even thinking that. I bet, like there's a few guys at the meetups and stuff who would love that. Imagine if we bought our laptop or whatever it is, and just like, can you just help me? Like, do as much as you can first, and then wherever you get stuck, you can just take it along. And
eventually, that must be like a service where like you have plumbers, and like it's like, right, my toilet's blocked. Call the plumber. There must be a service eventually where it's like, right, I want to set up a Bitcoin node, a Bitcoin wallet, and blah blah blah, and all this.
That's what the Bitcoin way do.
That's okay.
Literally what they do. I think their starting packages are like, I don't know, like $1,500 or something.
Right. Okay.
So it's not super cheap, and it probably goes up to like 10,000 if you want all the fancy stuff. But yeah, that is literally what they do. And so there'll be more. And again, this is the point of like a true global free market, is there'll be someone else that's like, oh yeah, I can do that, and they can maybe offer it for slightly less, and then so it'll get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper, and they'll get better and better.
Yeah, that would be a good service. I mean, I'd do that if it was like, right, £100, I'll come and set up a node. I'll show you how to do this. I'll show you how to buy a non-KYC Bitcoin. I'll show you how to set up a solo miner and all that stuff. I'd be like, yeah, sounds good. In fact, it'd probably be more than £100, but because it's pretty niche and specialized. But that's an emergent job coming up, I'm sure.
100%. And like, you just think of how many businesses will be like, actually, I want to run my own Lightning node, and then I can basically be my own bank. That is literally every business in the UK would want that, and at the minute, it doesn't even exist. So that's
local
what I mean
businesses
about just trying to learn these skills. I can see them paying off so much.
I mean, every like farmer or local business that you see that says like cash is king, we prefer cash, because
those are the ones.
The processing fees for like Visa and whatnot are take a large chunk. Yeah, those would be the ones that'd be like, right, we want Bitcoin. We want to pay 1 sat.
Yeah.
So the interwar. Actually, what chapter even is this? This is chapter 4.
Yeah, chapter 4.
Right, so I'll cut out that little bit there. Right then, so we're continuing chapter 4. This is the interwar era. Whereas under the international gold standard, money flowed freely between nations in return for goods, and the exchange rate between different currencies was merely the conversion between different weights of gold. Under monetary nationalism, the money supply of each country and the exchange rate between them was to be determined in international agreements and meetings. Germany suffered from hyperinflation after the Treaty of Versailles had imposed large reparations on it and sought to repay them using inflation. Britain had major problems with the flow of gold from its shores to France and the United States as it attempted to maintain a gold standard, but with a rate that overvalued the British pound and undervalued gold. The first major treaty of the century of monetary nationalism was the 1922 Treaty of Genoa. Under the terms of this treaty, the US dollar and the British pound were to be considered reserve currencies similar to gold in their position in other countries' reserves. With this move, the UK had hoped to alleviate its problems with the overvalued sterling by having other countries purchase large quantities of it to place in their reserves. The world's major powers signalled their... You're on the page 10. No, there we go. Signalled their departure from the solidity of the gold standard towards inflationism as a solution to economic problems. The insanity of this arrangement was that these governments wanted to inflate while also maintaining the price of their currency stable in terms of gold at pre-war levels. Safety was sought in numbers. If everyone devalued their currencies, there would be nowhere for capital to hide. But this did not and could not work, and gold continued to flow out of Britain to the United States and France. The drain of gold from Britain is a little-known story with enormous consequences. Liaquat Ahmed's Lords of Finance focuses on this episode and does a good job of discussing the individuals involved and the drama taking place, but adopts the reigning Keynesian understanding of the issue, putting the blame for the entire episode on the gold standard. In spite of his extensive research, Ahmed fails to comprehend that the problem was not the gold standard, but that post-World War I governments had wanted to return to the gold standard at the pre-World War I rates. Had they admitted to their people the magnitude of the devaluation that took place to fight the war, and re-pegged their currencies to gold at new rates, there would probably have been a recessionary crash, after which the economy would have recovered on a sound monetary basis. But they kicked the can down the road instead of saying, "Oh, sorry." A better treatment of this episode and its horrific aftermath can be found in Murray Rothbard's America's Great Depression, as Britain's gold reserves were leaving its shores to places where they were better valued. The chief of the Bank of England, Sir Montague Norman, leaned heavily on his French, German and American counterparts to increase the money supply in their countries, devaluing their paper currencies in the hope that it would stem the flow of gold away from England. While the French and German bankers were not cooperative, Benjamin Strong, chairman of the New York Federal Reserve, was and he engaged in inflationary monetary policy throughout the 1920s. This may have succeeded in reducing the outflow of gold from Britain up to a point, but the most important implication of it was that it created a larger bubble in the housing and stock markets in the United States. The US Fed's inflationary policy ended by the end of 1928, at which point the US economy was ripe for the inevitable collapse that followed from the suspension of inflationism. What followed was the 1929 stock market crash, and the reaction of the US government turned that into the longest depression in modern recorded history. It seems like they're basically just chasing the gold. Like they can devalue or increase in value this paper on top of their gold at any point. And it said there like the gold just flowed to where it was valued most. So even these governments that are running the economies, they still chase the gold. They still know where the true store of value is.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think even still to today, that is still been the case. Like a lot of countries are still chasing the gold because that is, they know that it's where value is. And I think as well, what they're fully aware of is they can literally reprice it at any time. So I wouldn't be surprised if that actually does happen, where they literally just, because I've dug that rabbit hole as well before. I think gold in today's, like, what is about $3,500 per ounce at the minute. somewhere around there. But it's gone up a lot in the last year or so. But it should be worth somewhere around $80,000, I think, if there wasn't so much paper gold. And where what we were just talking about before we hit record, I think we were saying how Bitcoin could do the same sort of thing, where if it's in custody with Coinbase, BlackRock says, hey, Coinbase, I want 1,000 Bitcoin, and Strategy on the same day says, hey, Coinbase, I want 1,000 Bitcoin. They can technically use the same 1,000 Bitcoin and give it to both. And so they're basically, that is what paper gold has been. It's well known now. It's not even people speculating on it. That is what is going on. They've just been doing exactly that with gold.
Is this like fractional reserve banking in a way?
Yeah, I guess similar, but it's more just rehypothecation, whatever that word is, where they're using the same gold. So they've got 10 kilograms of gold in their vault, but then they're just lending. They're giving ownership of that 10 kilograms to
different people.
50, it's 50 kilograms worth that they've actually given out to different people, and they all have. Yep. So I suppose it is like fractional reserve. So if everyone at the same time was like, hey, give me my, I want my physical gold from your vault.
It ain't there.
They haven't got enough. So whoever gets it first will be able to get it back. And that's where things like the price will go crazy if ever that was to happen. But it's such a faff. If you've got 3.4 ounces, they would have to shave off 3.4 ounces, and it would probably cost an absolute fortune. They would just whack on a load of fees. They make it really hard for anyone who's got their gold in a vault to actually get their gold.
Yeah.
Through these excessive fees, because they've had to shave off the gold or whatever, whatever they do, to the extent where it will probably cost a similar amount of, depending on how much gold it is that you've got, it will cost a lot basically for them to actually send it out to you, and then they've got to send it in an armored truck to your house or wherever it is that you want it to go to. So that is the issue with gold, and that is why Bitcoin is far better when you go back to first principles.
I was reading in the week about the Federal Reserve, and I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the Federal Reserve that has the exclusive ability to print money, the dollar for America, is a completely separate entity to the US government. People blend the two together, but it really needs to be drilled home. The two are completely separate entities. You've got the Federal Reserve, which is a private group of, private mafia, or the banking cartel. It's a private group of, shareholders. Me and you can't buy stocks and shares in the Federal Reserve. It's like a private, entity. And then you've got the US government, which is borrowing money from this private group at interest. So there's been stuff with Trump recently where he's saying, oh yeah, they need to decrease the interest rates and all this. It's the government has got no power over the Federal Reserve decisions at all. Yeah. It's so this chairman needs to step down and doing this. It's the Federal Reserve are just cool story, bro. You'd have got no control over our chairman, our decisions, our policies whatsoever. It's a completely separate entity. The US government is the Federal Reserve bitch.
Yeah.
They're so in debt to them. In fact, this is another little rabbit hole, but they're in debt. They're in more debt than actual dollars exist, because of the loans were based on usury in general. They can never pay it back. It's impossible to pay it back. So that amount of dollars doesn't even exist.
That is the Jeff Booth. What does he call it? Uncollateralized debt or something. Basically, unpayable debt. That is exactly what he was talking about, that 600 trillion that sits under all of this. And he said it's actually probably far more. It's just that we don't know.
Yeah.
There's no documentation on how much the Federal Reserve debt actually has that is impossible to pay back. It's not unlikely. It is physically impossible.
It's impossible because that many dollars don't exist. Like if you got the Federal Reserve and they've got the exclusive rights to print money, right? The dollar. And they on day one, like, right, we're gonna put $1 billion into circulation and we're gonna lend it to the government at interest. So we want interest on your loan, right? So next year we want 1% on that. Or let's say 1%. So we want, $1.01 billion back to pay that loan off. But that much money doesn't even exist because they've only printed 1 billion. Does that make sense? So this is the essence of usury, where they're wanting more money out of nothing, and then you're basically on a chain there. You're on that leash because eventually it's impossible to pay it back because that money isn't even in existence.
Exactly. It's really hard to get your head around. I remember the thing that really made me dive down to this rabbit hole is that I learned that every country in the world was in debt. And I was just like, how is that possible? And so that's what really started me diving down in this rabbit hole in like 2015. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Like if I'm in debt, I owe someone. Like if I'm in debt to, like, if I borrowed 20 quid from TC, I owe you. So you are owed that money. So you're not in debt, you are owed money. So it's like, how is that actually possible? And that is.
And who are they in debt to?
They're not. They are not in debt. And so that's the thing, is that every time debt is created, it is just created out of thin air. So it's not even, like when we get a mortgage, most people think, oh, the bank has this vault of, all this cash sitting there. And so when they give me a mortgage, they're just giving me someone else's money that is like sitting in the vault. But they're not. They literally just type on the screen.
Yeah, it's credit creation.
This money out of thin air. And so it's like, well, then. And that's what everyone has done because we live in this debt-based system.
But the biggest kind of scam with it all is, okay, they have the power to create this credit out of thin air that you then have to work for, which, okay, fine, you got to work for and then pay back to them. But if you don't, they take your shit. So like they'll take your actual assets. So say you've got collateral against a loan, or say as you said, let's say mortgage. Okay, so you go and get a mortgage, you sign your signature, then the bank creates that credit, right? And you could work for your whole life and pay that off for 30 years or whatever. But if you miss the last payment and you default on that mortgage, they'll come and take your actual assets, your hard assets, which is the house itself. Now, I don't know if, let's look at that on the big scale, like the US government, for example. Like, is it possible for them to default on their loans? Like, if so, would the bank literally just own every single asset in America? I guess
that was basically what started happening in 2008. Have you ever seen The Big Short?
Yeah, I have actually once upon a time.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching like 2 or 3 times because there's some complicated stuff in there. But that is literally what started happening. Is that, and it snowballs as well. Once someone defaults on it, it makes it much harder for other people to, it causes that crash in property prices. And then so if at the same time someone has lost their job, so. No, what were some of the big banks in the US?
What, the defaulted? Was it Lehman?
Yeah, so Lehman Brothers. Say you worked for the Lehman Brothers. You've got a house.
Yeah.
Let's say it's worth 200K, just for simple numbers. And then because all of these properties are like defaulting around you, it then goes down to 100,000. But you owe 150,000 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you lose your job and you can't pay it. And then so you can't even sell your asset to pay back your loan. So they just take it from you. Yeah. And so that is literally what was happening. And I don't think people realize this. That is literally, it's 100% going to happen again. It's not even like that's not a possibility, because since that has happened, rather than the bankers going to jail and people being held accountable and splitting up the banking monopolies and making smaller banks where people actually lend real money out, they've just doubled down. They bailed them out. They gave bankers rises and raises, and they've done it even more. Yeah, it's literally, and I think it's so hard for people to understand that. And it's like, well, because it's crazy. It's literally the biggest fraud that's happened in front of all of us, and there's not really much anyone can do about it other than, and so it will happen again. And when it happens next time, it will be on a next level, because
they're saying now it's
bigger.
not just the housing market bubble, or or the subprime mortgage bubble. It's the everything bubble. Exactly. Yeah. It's like,
and when you combine the rise of AI in this, so remember, it's the fact that because people lose their jobs, which means they can't pay their mortgage, and then if their house, their asset, is below what they owe, this is where it really snowballs, and it's just going to be crazy. And at the same time, AI is taking over people's jobs. It's just going to be insane. It's going to be absolutely mad what could play out, like, right in front of us. And people, and this is why it really frustrates me when I speak to my friends and they're like, I still don't get it. It's like, it doesn't matter. Or they'll often be like, but we live in the UK or, US or wherever it is. We live in the world where we're not part of the third world. This isn't going to, we're not going to have
couldn't possibly happen here.
Yeah. And it's like, I don't understand how you can see it not happening. Like, when you actually look at it from first principles and like actually take everything that out of your head and just try and like actually be like, okay, so this happened there because of this, and they've just done it more. It's like, how is it not going to happen again?
Yeah, I mean, it happened in Europe less than 100 years ago. Well, not just about. Germany, 20s.
Yeah, exactly. It's it's a bit crazy, a bit scary thinking about it, but
oh well, buy Bitcoin, stay humble, stay humble, stack sats. There we go. Right, let's crack on with this. The common story about the Great Depression posits that President Hoover chose to remain inactive in the face of the downturn due to a misplaced faith in the ability of free markets to bring about recovery and adherence to the gold standard. Only when he was replaced by Franklin D. Roosevelt, who moved to an activist governmental role and suspended the gold standard, did the US recovery ensue. This, to put it mildly, is nonsense. Hoover not only increased government spending on public work projects to fight the Depression, but he also leaned on the Federal Reserve to expand credit, and made the focus of his policy the insane quest to keep wages high in the face of declining wage rates. Further, price controls were instituted to keep prices of products, particularly agricultural, at high levels, similar to what was viewed as the fair and correct state that preceded the Depression. The United States and all major global economies began to implement protective trade policies that made matters far worse across the world economy. It is a little-known fact, carefully airbrushed from the history books, that in the 1932 US general election, Hoover ran on a highly interventionist platform, while Franklin D. Roosevelt ran on a platform of fiscal and monetary responsibility. Americans had actually voted against Hoover's policies, but when FDR got into power, he found it more convenient to play along with the interests that had influenced Hoover, and as a result, the interventionist policies of Hoover were amplified into what became known as the New Deal. It's important to realize that there was nothing unique or new about the New Deal. It was a magnification of the heavily interventionist policies which Hoover had instituted. Well, that's no surprise there then. You've got two opposing policies, two opposing politicians. The people vote in one, and then they just does whatever the banks wanted anyway. So we've seen that one before.
I did mean to say as well, when you were saying the Federal Reserve is a completely separate entity. So I was having a chat with my sister about Bitcoin recently, and she's basically a Bitcoiner. She just doesn't realize it. She has all the same sort of like views. She understands how broken.
I know people like that. Yeah, I know people like that. Yeah.
But the thing that she can't get over is that she's like, well, when you go into this new system, whatever it is, you're just going to be changing the power. You're just going to be shifting the power from whoever has the power now to someone else. And she's like, but the issue with that is that they're unelected and I haven't chosen for them to be in power. And this is where I was like explaining to her, I was like, do you know what the Federal Reserve is? And I do. she didn't really. I was like, do you realize that they're not part of the government and that you haven't elected them? Yet
it's not federal and there's no reserves.
Yeah. And they are the ones with the ultimate power. Like you say, they're at the top of the pecking order. It's not Trump.
Yeah.
It's not whoever the politicians are that you elect. It is the Federal Reserve. And this is why I have no interest in politics, because until you fix the money, there's no discussion to be had, because they are literally puppets and are doing stuff. Like you say, it doesn't matter which side you're on or opposing sides, they're going to just do the same thing.
I was reading about like the Federal Reserve Act when that came in. I think it was like drafted 1910. Came in like 1913 or something. But I was reading about how that came in. At the time, there was 3 presidential candidates, and I think it was like Woodrow Wilson was the guy that actually got the job, and he put the Federal Reserve Act through. And there was 2 other candidates as well. But behind each presidential candidate was a different banker with basically the same policy but under different names. It was like, okay, you got the Federal Reserve Act, and there was a like Paul Warburg or whatever, I think we mentioned last week, one of these Warburg dudes was funding Woodrow Wilson with the Federal Reserve Act. Then you had this other presidential candidate who was Halley with this other banker who had the same thing, like for a central bank of central banks, but under a different name. And then you had another third presidential candidate with another banker, and all 3 of these bankers that had this act had all gone to this Jekyll Island meetup kind of thing. So either way, whoever was going to be going into power was funded by this, Jekyll Island banking cartel. And it just so happened that Woodrow Wilson got in, and then he passed the Federal Reserve Act, and then that was it. Boom. So there's loads of madness around that whole.
Do you think if you were in that position, would you do the same thing? Do you think that if you were paid enough and you just keep quiet about it, do whatever you need to do? I'd like to think that I wouldn't, but I think it's very hard.
To be honest, like I don't know whether they've got that much choice. I mean, are we mentioning J. Edgar Hoover here? Actually, no. Is President Hoover different to J. Edgar Hoover? Like, I think J. Edgar Hoover was the guy that was head of FBI. I don't know. I'm reading this other book on blackmail at the minute as well, and like so many of these characters are just like compromised with blackmail. Like, I think it was around. I can't remember what era. It might be like post World War II, like 40s. The head of the FBI, this guy called J. Edgar Hoover. He was just like massively compromised by the mafia. He was basically like, there was pictures of him like wearing ladies' clothes and stuff, and he was going to these kind of like Epstein style sex parties, and he was basically compromised. So the mafia at the time in America had the head of the FBI by the balls. And I'm reading this in like an academic book. It's not like a conspiracy book. This is like well known now.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't surprise me if at this time as well, these people were compromised by the bankers.
That's true.
Who knows?
Yeah, and I've just read, J. Edgar Hoover was an FBI director under 8 different US presidents, spanning from Herbert Hoover. So I imagine this is Herbert Hoover. They're talking about the president to Richard Nixon. But yeah, no, I think you're exactly right as well. And I think you only even get into those positions by being like family or friends sort of thing. So you're literally, it would be like turning your back on your friends and family if you were to do it. Like they're not like me and you with our life are never going to get into that position sort of thing. So it's not even I suppose it's not even a thing that could happen.
Yeah. I mean, this is the whole Epstein thing where it's like, why is that such a hot potato? I think it's because the whole system itself is propped up by it. Because at those highest levels, you have to be compromised in some way. But anyway, that's a subject for another podcast. Where did I get up to? The New Deal. A precursory understanding of economics will make it clear that price controls are always counterproductive, resulting in surpluses and shortages. The problems faced by the American economy in the 1930s were inextricably linked to the fixing of wages and prices. Wages were set too high, resulting in a very high unemployment rate, reaching 25% at certain points, while price controls had created shortages and surpluses of various goods. Some agricultural products were even burned in order to maintain their high prices. leading to the insane situation where people were going hungry, desperate for work, while producers couldn't hire them as they couldn't afford their wages. And the producers who could produce some crops had to burn some of them to keep the prices high. That's a pretty crazy situation to be in. All of this was done to maintain prices at the pre-1929 boom levels while holding on to the delusion that the dollar had still maintained its value compared to gold. The inflation of the 1920s had caused large asset bubbles to form in the housing and stock markets, causing an artificial rise in wages and prices. After the bubble burst, market prices sought readjustment via a drop in the value of the dollar compared to gold, and a drop in real wages and prices. The pig-headedness of deluded central planners who wanted to prevent all three from taking place paralyzed the economy. The dollar, wages, and prices were overvalued, leading to people seeking to drop their dollars for gold, as well as massive unemployment and failure of production. None of this, of course, would be possible with sound money, and only through inflating the money supply did these problems occur. And even after the inflation, the effects would have been far less disastrous had they revalued the dollar to gold at a market-determined price and let wages and prices adjust freely. So yeah, it's basically like, rip the plaster off, get it over and done with, let it adjust naturally, organically, rather than, kicking the can down the road 100 years. Instead of learning that lesson, the government economists of the era decided that the fault was not in inflationism, but rather in the gold standard, which restricted government's inflationism. In order to remove the golden fetters to inflationism, President Roosevelt issued an executive order banning the private ownership of gold, forcing Americans to sell their gold to the US Treasury at a rate of $20.67 per ounce. With the population deprived of sound money and forced to deal with dollars, Roosevelt then revalued the dollar on the international market from $20.67 per ounce to $35 per ounce, a 41% devaluation of the dollar in real terms, brackets gold. This was the inevitable reality of years of inflationism which started in 1914 with the creation of the Federal Reserve and the financing of America's entry into World War II. It was the abandonment of sound money and its replacement with government-issued fiat which turned the world's leading economies into centrally planned and government-directed failures. As governments controlled the money, they controlled most economic, political, cultural, and educational activity. That's another good point. That sentence there. This goes into Seyfedin's other book. The consequences of fiat. So as governments controlled money, they controlled most economic, political, cultural, and educational activity.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're seeing all of those just heavily be subverted, degraded, whatever you want to call it.
I don't think that, food does that come under any of those categories? Cultural, maybe?
Maybe cultural, but I mean, he was talking about the food chaos before, yeah.
Yeah.
Having never studied economics or researched it professionally, Keynes captured the zeitgeist of omnipotent government to come up with the definitive track that gave governments what they wanted to hear. Gone were all the foundations of economic knowledge acquired over centuries of scholarship around the world, to be replaced with the new faith with the ever so convenient conclusions that suited high time preference politicians and totalitarian governments. The state of the economy is determined by the lever of aggregate spending, and any rise in unemployment or slowdown in production had no underlying causes in the structure of production or in the distortion of markets by central planners. Rather, it was all a shortage of spending, and the remedy is the debauching of the currency and the increase of government spending. Saving reduces spending, and because spending is all that matters, government must do all it can to deter its citizens from saving. Imports drive workers out of work, so spending increases must go on domestic goods. Governments love this message, and Keynes himself knew that. His book was translated into German in 1937 at the height of the Nazi era, and in the introduction to the German edition, Keynes wrote, "The theory of aggregate production, which is the point of the following book, nevertheless can be much easier adapted to the conditions of a totalitarian state than the theory of production and distribution of a given production put forth under conditions of free competition and a large degree of laissez-faire. Interesting to talk about this because I can't remember who said it, but they talk about like presidents and politicians and whatnot, and all of these politicians may run on the campaign of, I'm going to sort the money out, we're going to sort the economy out, blah, blah, blah. But the only way to do it, as it's said, is to basically rip the plaster off and... Oh, have you got it on here? It's basically to rip the plaster off and get it over and done with. It's going to be a bit of chaos for a little bit, short term, but afterwards you can start healing on a more of a sound, like more of a gold standard or more of a sound money. But when a president or politician gets in, none of them want to do that, because if they cause economic chaos like that for the short term, they ain't going to get re-elected again.
Yeah.
So exactly. Even like Trump is like, okay, well, we're going to sort this situation out. It's like, but he's not going to want to go through that chaos because the people, I guess, are so short-sighted. They're just going to think, well, I can't afford to eat anymore, so fuck President Trump or whatever. I'm not going to re-vote him back in. But that's what essentially has to happen, I guess, unless there's some other kind of plan involved.
Yeah. Now, on that as well, I'm actually reading that book, Dominic Frisby's The End of the State.
Oh, yeah.
A minute, and it literally just ties into this so well, because everything that the government, everything that the state actually does, even if it's well intentioned or looks well intentioned, such as giving out what's it called, like benefits to deprived people or challenged people, or welfare. Yeah. So even with things like welfare, you think, you can't just take welfare away. Like, these people really need it. But the issue is, by everything from subsidies to everything that they do, even if it looks well intentioned, which often it's not, is taken away from the free market, because when you provide welfare, that means then they need to tax more to be able to cover for it. And by taxing everyone, it means that our purchasing power is getting decreased, because we have to give more to the government, which means that we can't really save as much, which means we don't have as much flexibility and freedom, which means if everyone had enough money where they saved up, where they could choose to maybe not work for 2 years or something like that and start a business in something that they're really passionate about, that could potentially really help.
Or charity or something. For
example, let's just say the person that the benefits is helping is someone that is like physically disabled or something. They're bound to a wheelchair. Who's to say that by allowing people more freedom and time, they couldn't figure out something that either made a better wheelchair for that person who's in welfare? So even though you're providing them the welfare, you're taking away other unknown potential things that could happen for them. Or maybe they create a business which really benefits people who are in a wheelchair for whatever reason. I don't know what the example would be in that situation, but
or if people had more time, then maybe there would be a lot more public services like orphanages or hospitals that were ran by volunteers who weren't restrained to just work 6 hours a week.
It improves the culture, the community ethos in every community, because that becomes more important. And it's the same with the NHS. People are like, but you can't take away the NHS, it's free healthcare, blah blah blah. But if there was just local doctors in your area and there is like a community around it, and people sort of like, there's even something in the US now where there are people who are stopping healthcare, and what they sort of do is like they pay into some sort of pool, and whenever there's someone has an emergency, they can sort of share what their emergency is with the pool, and everyone funds them, sort of like crowdfunding in a certain way. And then so it means that you all chip in to someone who's in need, knowing that when you're in need, hopefully everyone can chip in for you. But then, because of the way that healthcare really works, is that some people just will never need it, sort of thing. But that's fine. You still are more than willing to, if it's your mum, for example, that needs it, you're going to go above and beyond to help them out, sort of thing. And so that's kind of the point, is that in a free market, people sort it out themselves.
I think it was maybe Jeff Booth where he said in one of his things, we can't even really comprehend what that's like because we've never had it. So there's nothing to even really compare it against, or it's almost like a completely not utopian, but like, well, it might seem that way, but we just don't have those frames of reference to even comprehend what a true free market would look like because we've not been born into one.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it.
What's this timeline?
But this is, I don't know if you've seen Mike Maloney's Hidden Secrets of Money. I remember
I don't think so.
looking at that year, but he's a gold bug, so he's like it's all positioned to how gold's going to do, and that's his business. So he's very biased towards gold. Although he does actually have an episode on cryptocurrency. Although he's talks a lot about like Hedera Hashgraph or something like, a shitcoin. So,
right.
But I think he sort of understands Bitcoin, and so I know he definitely has some Bitcoin anyway. But yeah, it was just, I think you at some point in that chapter there was talking about that sort of dollar devaluation from roughly $20 per ounce to $35 per ounce. So it's basically anyone who didn't hold gold had a 40% cut. What it fails to mention here was it in 1933 or sometime in that, where they basically banned the ownership of gold. So basically you couldn't, like, unless you're literally holding it without and like not declaring it. Basically everyone had a 40% cut in purchasing power.
Like jail time, wasn't it?
The what time?
You got jail time if you were caught with gold or something.
Yeah. And so, I just thought like seeing this timeline is quite helpful to see, from up till 1914, it was like the classical gold standard where gold was just fixed at $20.67 an ounce. And you could actually go into a bank, you could take your $20 bill and get $20 worth of gold pieces in return. So you could actually, there was no real fractional reserve going on before.
It was 1-to-1 fixed.
And then obviously the World War happened. Remember we said last episode, was it Warburg, one of the German guys, had moved to the United States in 1911, 1913, the Federal Reserve was set up. And then 1914, World War I happened between US and Germany, obviously other European countries. But those German brothers, one was in charge of stuff in Germany and one was in charge of the Federal Reserve, or like part of the Federal Reserve in the United States. So could have just been a coincidence.
I'm sure.
But yeah, so then that's when the whole printing press, like that's the exact stage you were just saying, and how everyone was struggling to be able to afford anything because they were trying to keep it at $20.67, but they'd done loads of printing, so it wasn't like it wasn't fairly backed, and that's where that kind of squeeze happened. Where if they just let it go in the free market, gold would reprice to the right amount, and people would have still owned gold. This is before they confiscated it, and so their purchasing power would have not been too badly affected as long as they owned some gold in savings. But yeah, I just thought, like, in that series that he goes through these stages of like how money changed. And then obviously we don't know what's going to be this next stage. Who knows what that's going to be.
Were you saying that it should be 80,000 per ounce or something like that? Were you saying something along those lines?
I can find it, but I'll see if I can find it and pop it up.
I'll read the next bit and you have a look for that.
But yeah, it's not even close, basically. It's where it should be. Okay. Oh no, mine's not sharing.
Let me try this time.
Oh yeah, that's exactly, must have been what was happening with you.
No, mine isn't working. Oh, there we go. Is that yours?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's yours. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. I'll cut that other little bit out. So I've got two little pieces to cut out, but that's fine. There have been technical difficulties. Right then, so the Keynesian deluge from which the world is yet to recover had begun. Universities lost their independence and became part and parcel of the government's ruling apparatus. Academic economics stopped being an intellectual discipline focused on understanding human choices under scarcity to improve their conditions. Instead, it became an arm of the government meant to direct policymakers towards the best policies for managing economic activities. The notion that government management of the economy is necessary became the unquestioned starting point of all modern economic education, as can be gleaned from looking at any modern economics textbook, where government plays the same role that God plays in religious scriptures, an omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent force that merely needs to identify problems to satisfactorily address them. Government is immune to the concept of opportunity costs, and rarely are the negative results of government intervention in economic activity even considered. If they are, it is only to justify even more government intervention. The classical liberal tradition that viewed economic freedom as the foundation of economic prosperity was quietly brushed aside as government propagandists masquerading as economists presented the Great Depression, caused and exacerbated by government controls, as the refutation of free markets. Classical liberals were the enemies of the political regimes of the 1930s. Murdered and chased away from Russia, Italy, Germany, and Austria, they were fortunate to only be academically persecuted in the United States and the UK, where these giants struggled to find employment, while middling bureaucrats and failed statisticians filled every university economics department with their scientism and fake certainty. Today, government-approved economics curricula still blame the gold standard for the Great Depression, the same gold standard which produced more than 4 decades of virtually uninterrupted global growth and prosperity between 1870 and 1914, suddenly stopped working in the 1930s because it wouldn't allow governments to expand their money supply to fight the Depression, whose causes these economists cannot explain beyond meaningless Keynesian allusions to animal spirits. And none of these economists seem to notice that if the problem was indeed the gold standard, then its suspension should have caused the beginning of recovery. Well, that's pretty simple. Good point. Instead, it took more than a decade after its suspension for growth to resume. The conclusion obvious to anyone with a basic understanding of money and economics is that the cause of the great crash of 1929 was the diversion away from the gold standard in the post-World War I years, and that the deepening of the Depression was caused by government control and socialization of the economy in the Hoover and FDR years. Neither the suspension of the gold standard nor the wartime spending did anything to alleviate the Great Depression. As the major economies of the world went off the gold standard, global trade was soon to be shipwrecked on the shores of oscillating fiat money. With no standard of value to allow an international price mechanism to exist, and with governments increasingly captured by statist and isolationist impulses, currency manipulation, next page, currency manipulation emerged as a tool of trade policy, with countries seeking to devalue their currencies in order to give their exporters an advantage. More trade barriers were erected, and economic nationalism became the ethos of that era, with predictably disastrous consequences. The nations that had prospered together 40 years earlier, trading under one universal gold standard, now had large monetary and trade barriers between them. Loud populist leaders who blamed all their failures on other nations, and a rising tide of hateful nationalism that was soon to fulfill Otto Mallory's prophecy, quote, "If soldiers are not to cross international boundaries, goods must do so. Unless the shackles can be dropped from trade, bombs will be dropped from the sky," end quote. There we go.
Yeah. It's I I do think this chapter again is really important. It's like both, I think chapter 3 and 4 are arguably the most important ones, although it's sort of, I remember when I first read it, I was kind of like, I just wanted to learn about Bitcoin. I was like,
I know what you mean, yeah.
But it's
but
without knowing this, it's
well, you need to understand
pointless.
The problem before you understand the Bitcoin solution, I guess.
Also, don't you think it's crazy how Keynes, whatever his name is didn't even study any like financial history or have any financial background, yet he's basically managed to dictate or persuade the powers that be to use his model without any like. It just baffles me how.
I didn't. Yeah,
I think
he'll be an interesting character to look into then.
Yeah, it is crazy. It is crazy what's actually happened. But yeah.
Right. Well, should we pause there and then crack on with World War II and Bretton Woods next episode?
Yeah. Shall I show you the gold?
Yeah.
The gold price. So this is if it was to be used as money, I think is what was working out. I think I'd heard it on a podcast with Jeff Booth or something. Can you see this? Can you see that?
No.
No. Oh.
Oh, yeah.
You got it now?
It's loading. Yep, got it.
Okay. So there was basically like I sort of said about the 900 trillion, and then AI had done loads of research and worked out it was more like 500, 600 trillion. But I think the thing is, no one really knows. It's you always have to estimate. You can't. It's not like the blockchain where this information is publicly available, sort of thing. So, but going off, it used 575 trillion for the current wealth. So if gold was to be, if everything was repriced back to a gold standard, then it would be $82,696 per ounce.
That's if every piece of value in the world was put into gold.
So yeah, basically that's how it was. That's how it was on the gold standard. So if we were to go back to a gold standard, it would basically need to be repriced by somewhere about 24 to 38 times sort of overnight. Whereas when they did it before, remember, it was a 40% drop. So what's that? It's not even a 2x. Whereas now we're like 20, way more undervalued. There was something as well. I can't find where I went down that rabbit hole. But there is something as well about showing the sort of paper gold on how there's a lot more lent out. But the bit that I did find quite interesting was I was just sort of spitballing here. I was kind of thinking, so if I could definitely see some sort of like gold / Bitcoin reserve thing sort of coming back on, I can't see them just going straight to a Bitcoin one, just simply because so many nations have gold sort of thing, and so few have Bitcoin at the moment. So, but I think that is definitely possible to go on to like some sort of combination of gold / Bitcoin. And this was the numbers that sort of came out if there was a crisis, a collapse, and what would be normal. So that was this was just going through AI, what they would think it blended fair value. So it'd be like $100,000 an ounce of gold, which I'm not really sure how it works that out, because that's obviously more than what the current monetary system has. So, but yeah, I just thought it was quite interesting that it's not like they basically can't just go back on a gold standard tomorrow. And I think this has been the issue for a while. Even like Switzerland, we mentioned before, they tried to do it, but this is kind of the reason why they can't just go back to it, because they would need, like, gold would need to be repriced significantly to actually account for all the money that's been printed.
That's right. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Should we call it a day?
Yeah.
Coffee break?
Yes.
Right then. See you next time.